it's so lovely to meet you, and our audience wants to give you a big round of applause for this beautiful film.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm going to turn this microphone over to Tom Needham, who will be conducting the Q&A with you. And thank you again, and I'm glad that you're safe and sound at home.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go. Hi, Connie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So congratulations. I love the documentary. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this Q&A tonight. I think everyone here enjoyed the film a great deal.
Thank you. It's an honor
So,
to be chosen.
Well, as was already mentioned to the audience, you have a background in dancing, and you have a lot of knowledge about this material. Can you explain to our audience in a little bit more detail some information about your past and how you came to make this film?
Sure. I'm sorry, we were speaking over each other. I just want to say thank you for choosing In Balanchin's Classroom for the festival. It's an honor that it was shown. So I was at Balanchin School of American Ballet as a child. And it was a very special school when he was around. Still is a special school, but his presence definitely infused that world with a special atmosphere. And I went through the school wanting to join the company and dance for Balanchin and dance his ballets. And your desire to dance for Balanchin only increases as you get closer to being a professional. But I was not chosen to be in his company. And so I left the school to dance professionally with a lot of unfinished business. I felt that I still had some way my life would intersect with his work. And I did get to dance many of his ballets. Whenever I worked with a coach who had been trained by Balanchin, there was something very different about what they knew about dancing and the body and expression. And I just realized that something happened in that morning class that other dancers who were not privy to that information would never quite know. And I thought back when I was at the school and some of my friends were getting into the company and dancing for Balanchin, I would ask them about this morning class. So we all knew he taught. We all had been through the school with very hard classes. And so I wanted to know, how did his class compare to what we were learning? And as soon as I asked my friends to tell me about this class, they clammed up, they shut down. And I said, but why? Tell me, I'm really interested. And they would just go like this. They wouldn't talk about it. And I could tell there was something off-putting about it. So later when I was a professional and my curiosity was piqued again, I decided that at some point I would need to just sit with each one that would talk to me in an interview and ask them. So at one point I just started doing that. And once they realized I really wanted to know, why was it off-putting? What was so hard about it? What was so different about it? They started meeting me halfway and really opening up about it. So that slowly began to satisfy that curiosity I had to know what made the dancers who danced for him in his company, what made that experience unique.
Who would you say is your target audience for this movie?
Well, in the process of making it, it was very, very important to me and my husband, the executive producer, and my team. It was very important all along that it be for a general audience. I know it gets very deep into ballet and training, but what Balanchine taught to me has universal meaning. First of all, dance is communication. As Balanchine said, the real reality, there's a certain realm that's not here on earth. It's something beyond, and you can't speak to that with our language of words. So there is something that he was teaching that is universal, and I think it has to do with being present, has to do with aspiring to something that gives life meaning on a daily basis, but also just to know what your life is about. And he was always teaching on that level. While he was teaching tendus and how to hold the hand and point the foot, he was teaching them on that level. And that's what we tried to capture.
This is an unusual documentary in the sense that it's not a traditional biographical film. It really does focus on his teaching, as you were just talking about, and then later on the people who are continuing to teach about him. When did you know that that's the film you wanted to make?
Going back to when I was a child and he would be around the school, the year that I enrolled in School American Ballet was the year they moved from City Center, New York City Center, on a small stage to the New York State Theater, which was a vast stage, huge. So he was very hands-on. All the productions that called for children, like The Nutcracker, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Many Harlequinade. He was right there with the children, and he was spacing us on the stage, and he'd take our hands, and he treated children not quite like adults, but with such dignity and respect for their intelligence and their abilities. He was extremely polite, genteel. These are, and there was a palpable bond between him and his dancers, the grown-ups, his dancers. There was a incredible bond, and I mean, I call it love. These made such impressions on me as a child. When I finally got to making this movie, it was very important to me that it was about the teacher. He taught because he choreographed. He wanted to bring his ballets to life. But he was also interested in developing people, developing dancers. But to him, the dancer and the person is one. You dance who you are. And he was nurturing, developing, as you could see, he treated Meryl very differently than he treated Heather and Edward. Everyone was an individual. So these are, as soon as I started doing the interviews, and each interview was so different one from the other. They spoke even to the same subject. They had such different experiences, interpretations, perspectives. And so it right away became more than just ballet. It became about the man. It became about people, that he loved personalities. He loved individuals. The music first, right? Then dancing, but then it was the individual. He loved quirky people. They were like problems to solve. How could he get in there and bring out their talent, or if they didn't have confidence, or if they had too much confidence, whatever it was. So to me, this was the gist of it, right from the start. How do you bring out this certain chemistry that happened between Balanchine and each of his dancers, the company as a whole, but between him and each of his dancers? How do you bring that out? It's through the medium of dance, but it's always a bigger purpose. The scope was always beyond. It would have been enough to be about ballet, and I actually want to do a version of this for dancers because there's so much that I feel dancers today would just devour, but that wouldn't be for a general audience, all that, in the weeds. But no, it had to be about the man, not just the teacher, the choreographer, but the man.
I was fascinated by his knowledge of music and how he could read music and how he incorporated his knowledge of music into his dance instruction. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about why that was so important. And then also, as a filmmaker yourself, I noticed that you rely very heavily on music score, very often using the score instead of the original source music when you see people dancing, and what you were actually going for in terms of the emotion and the music. It's a great score. And I was wondering if you could just express a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Okay, that's a big question. First of all, Balanchine's backstory is fascinating. We only could give you a haiku of it. His sister was auditioning when he was a child. His mother brought him along just because she had to just have him there for the day. But as soon as they noticed a little boy, they said, "Why isn't he auditioning?" And at I think 7 years old, he got into the school through no desire of his own, and that was it. It was a boarding school. He hardly saw his family again. So it's a fascinating childhood. He wasn't happy there for a long time. He ran away. His aunt was in St. Petersburg. His aunt brought him back. But one night, he was in a production, Sleeping Beauty, that called for children. And he remembered this and recounted it in class. He told a lot of stories, and he told stories from his childhood and revolution. And he told a story that night, Sleeping Beauty, when he heard the Tchaikovsky music, and the gorgeous costumes and the lights and the sets and the theater, he had this aha moment. He realized what ballet could be. And that's when he started opening up to the possibilities. And then he had a different feeling about being at the Imperial School. But as he was going through the school, he was also taking music theory and piano. And he was a trained musician at the highest level at the conservatory. And I happen to think he was a musical genius beyond his, choreographic gifts. I think he was absolutely a musical genius. But at one point, he decided he would be a choreographer. He did talk to some of the musicians, his pianists, that he did think of becoming composer and pianist, but he thought I think there was a need for choreographers more than composers or pianists. So the music always first. He could take the orchestra version of the music and write his own reduction for the piano. He could speak to musicians as a musician. And I think when I speak, I don't mean to speak for Balanchine. It's always how I'm interpreting all the interviews, what I learned. I'm just trying to interpret what I learned. I'm not speaking for Balanchine. But one of his ballerinas said that when he was watching dancers, either in class or to choose a new dancer for the company, or even when he was watching in a studio rehearsal, the choreography, very often his eyes were cast down. He wasn't watching frequently the face or the whole body. His eyes were cast down. And she was very comfortable. This was Kay Mazzo, one of the ballerinas in the archival footage. She's very comfortable. And she asked Balanchine one day, "Why, when you're watching us, why are you always looking down? Why aren't you looking at all of us?" And he said something like, "I watch the feet. If the feet are in time, I know I can work with that dancer, because how you hear the music is translated through your feet." So it was always the rhythm for him. I mean, the melody and the, all the other dimension of music affected him, I know, greatly, but it was the rhythm that somehow, as he says, the composer creates time, architect of time. That's just what I guess got his creativity going. So that's just a little bit about him and music. He took other dancers to the opera. I mean, music was the first god, as Heather said in her interview. Music was the first god. As far as the score, thank you. I'm so glad if you found this score, stirring and gave the movie cohesion. It was very hard for music to tie the movie together when you have music like Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky and all these other incredible composers, somehow having to make a score that would give that the fabric cohesion. But I had a composer who this took a long time. The whole movie, it took about 15 years. We didn't edit for 15 years, but from the editing process on, which was about 6 years, he begged me to do it. And he kept wanting to get started. And I said, Chris, we're not ready. We're nowhere near ready. We're having trouble. We're struggling. And he kept begging. He said, but I want to do it. I'll wait for you. And he had such passion about, Balanchine. And when I showed him little clips, and I knew he had done plenty of scores, I just felt something about his compulsion to do this movie. And I'm glad I went with him. I think he was incredible. He was a hand holder, he just would not stop till I was happy. And the one question I asked him about before we signed a contract, I said, Chris, what happens if you write something and I don't like it? And you do another version and I don't like it. I'm scared we're going to get to this, He said, Connie, don't worry. Wherever that comes from, there's plenty more. So he really put me at ease. He could just keep, like Balanchine was so prolific. Chris gave me the feeling there's an endless well and he'll just keep writing. And he did.
Can you give me a little sense of the commitment that many of these dancers had to him, in particular the women? There was that one line in the film, this is not verbatim, about how the women were told that anyone can have a family, anyone can have kids, and not anyone can be a dancer. And it seems like that was really just a major driving idea, that you have to commit yourself to this life.
Yeah, I mean, I know he said that. I know he did say that. But he also had plenty of dancers in the company who were married. Merrill Ashley got married while she was a principal dancer. Suki Shore was married. Jacques was married. I mean, the man. But what happened was, these questions are so, I can go on forever. Some of the women who danced for him in the beginning, when ballet wasn't really established in this country yet, it took a while. And he would invest a lot in his dancers, as you can tell, teaching them, rehearsing them, watching performance all day. He'd invest a lot. These were feisty women. 1948, when New York City Ballet started, that generation, it was still about kind of getting married and having a family. Meanwhile, Balanchine was nurturing from teenage years right through. And so a few times a dancer would come to him in the company, having danced for him for a while, and say, I met someone I'd like to get, I'm going to leave, I'm going to get married and start a family. And a number of them recount this conversation that they had one-on-one with Balanchine. And it was similar, unique to each dancer, but similar. And he'd say, are you sure you want to? Are you sure you want to? Stop dancing. And they'd say, yes, I'm in love. And half the time he was invited to their wedding. But he would say to them, you have something special. You're a dancer. You can dance. And he just wanted to make sure that this journey of an artist, that they understood this is a special journey. It's not for everyone. And that they had what it takes. You know, when he says the portals are open, the passage is narrow, but the portals are open, he really saw it as this great spiritual calling to be an artist, to be a dancer. So he was trying to tell these young women, there is more than just getting married and having a family. Look, I'm a mother and now a grandmother. So to me, family is everything, almost. But and Gloria Govern is a grandmother. So it's not a question of comparing and one is more important. But Balanchine saw the life of an artist as a very, very high calling. And he even said to one of them who was marrying an officer, he said, go get married. And, but if ever anything happens and he doesn't treat you right, you come back to me. You come back. And she told this story that something like 10 years after he was West Point graduate, and she came back to watch class, and she came in, she said, dressed as an officer's wife, and she described it, and with my hose and my heels. And Balanchine saw her come in and ran over and introduced her to the company. This is one of my girls. It wasn't pejorative to call her a girl. He meant one of my ladies, one of my dancers. But he said to her, but it's been more than 10 years. He remembered that last conversation. He remembered that. But that's what he meant. Go have your life, but you're a special artist in the making. And a few of those conversations, but many of them got married, and some of them had children. But there is something to what he was doing with them is a little different from directors today. Most directors today do not walk in and teach class every day, rehearse all day, choreograph, watch performance, and then start the whole thing again. They don't do that. They do part of it. But Balanchine was investing was off the charts. And he really did have a feeling that to do this a certain way, you're really dividing yourself to try to do both. To try to bring up a family, and it's a lot to try to do it all. Today dancers do both, and they're getting amazing results. They're having their family and they're being dancers. It's wonderful. But in Balanchine's time, it was a different endeavor.
If I could ask one more question before we open it up to the audience. Along the lines of what you were just talking about, it seems that he thought it was almost a calling, almost like a religious calling. One of the things as an outside observer that one feels like when watching the film, I don't mean this in a negative way, but it seems almost cult-like, the way everyone is just in awe of him. And I was wondering, like, what is it about him, that makes people respond in the way that they do? I mean, it's in the film, I guess, but just from your own point of view, because you see a lot of documentaries about famous people, and they don't all have the number of people that you have in your film speaking this way. He had some kind of like effect on them.
Yeah,
That's really remarkable. It's more than just the dancing. It seems like he really got into their soul.
yeah. I think that's very fair. So I interviewed 90 dancers from the first ballet he did in America, Serenade, 1948, an original cast member. She was in her 90s. She still spoke with stars in her eyes about him, and she was smart as a whip, sharp. when she talked about Balanchine, she looked like she was 18 years old, Yvonne Patterson. And all the way through to the last group of dancers he chose, 1981, before he started failing. I also talked to 10 people who weren't dancers. One was a pianist for performance and class and rehearsal. One was a stage and set designer, light and stage. Some of his big ballets, Midsummer Night's Dream, Stars and Stripes. And anyway, many others who, one of the stage managers, they all spoke about him teaching them about their own craft. But beyond his knowledge of all these different art forms and what goes into producing ballet, I think it had to do with his love of people. And he had this kind of X-ray vision into a person and their capabilities, aside from the personalities, which he loved, the quirkier, the better. He saw something about what made them tick and a certain fire in the belly. And those people who wanted to, create with him, there was this symbiosis, and I think it was addictive. Being in the studio in the theater with him, I don't think there was any experience on earth greater for them than getting there in the morning and working with him. Yes, it was very, very hard on the body. And I tried to say in these Q&As, if it gets to the question of how hard the class was on the body, that it wasn't meant to dip into and out of, like Olympic training. If anyone in the audience, or I, or you, my husband, if any of us just jumped into some Olympic training day, whether it's running or whatever, it would break our bodies. Well, Balanchine's class wasn't meant to try for a day. It was meant as a daily regimen till your muscles got the strength and you got the stamina to do the class. And then then you craved it because it gave you such super strength and ability that performance was just, you were flying. So the class gave them so much. The rest of the day did. The performance, they felt that they were in this protected bubble. Nobody loved watching them dance more than Balanchine. When they were on stage and he was in the wing, he just adored it. And I just think that while he was alive, nothing could beat working for Balanchine. So yeah, they just, even some dancers left and they came back. Some wanted to try dancing, Giselle and full length swan leg, and they'd come back. That's as much as I can say. They say he was the best person to ever work for. He knew what they could do, and he knew them when they were young people beyond what they knew. They didn't have that great self-knowledge, and he just brought them along. And if you have someone nurturing you like that and treating you with respect, first of all, respect, and enjoying your personality, even Heather gave him a hard time. Heather's the first to say, she's still a handful. She's the first to admit, and Balanchine would not give up on her. Balanchine would not give up. Edward rejected the class. He just stopped taking it. He took it for a while as a new dancer in the company, and then he just stopped. Balanchine never would give up on them because he knew they were great, great artists in the making. And plus he enjoyed their company. I mean, I don't think it's fair to talk about the class and the teacher he was without describing that class had many facets. As I think I touched on, he would tell stories. He would joke. He had a great sense of humor. One story, I know we're going a long time on this, but one day Heather performed in a new part that he gave her. And the next day, I believe it was in the New York Times, she got a very bad review. And the critic said that she was miscast, never should have been in the ballet. And Heather was very young at that point. She came into class, and there are her idols. Patricia McBride, Suzanne Farrell came as all her idols. And she was just, meek and embarrassed and just not wanting to have to look at anyone after getting such a bad review. And Balanchine came in and he started talking about it. He said, well, now they feel like they should cast my ballet. I shouldn't cast my ballet. They should cast my ballet. And he flipped the whole thing on its head and made it sound like they were quite foolish for telling the world that this ballet was miscast. And so Heather came out feeling fine, and they all joked about it. And there were many of these moments in class, very light family time where they could talk amongst themselves. So these are some of the reasons why dancers love being in the company with Balanchine.
That's great. All right, so does anyone here want to ask some questions in the audience? All right, well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. And please, I hope you can hear me. Thank you to everyone in the audience for coming out tonight, because I know the weather was a little iffy. But thank you for coming. It's different in a theater than screening or one-day DVD. So thank you.
We want to thank you so much for your beautiful time and joining us this evening. And I hope that you don't get too much rain up there. Okay. Good night. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much.